Do you ever feel a strange discomfort when you look at your account balance, not because the number is wrong, but because you can't remember what the last 3 years actually bought you? Have you noticed how easy it is to justify a purchase in the moment, but how hard it is to recall why you made it 6 months later? What if the real cost of your spending isn't showing up in your budget at all? There's a specific kind of regret that doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't come with a crisis or a bill you can't pay. It arrives quietly, usually in your mid-30s or early 40s, when you're looking at where you are and trying to trace back how you got there. And what you find isn't a series of disasters, it's a series of forgettable transactions. Small things, reasonable things, things that made sense at the time. And yet, somehow, they added up to years you can't account for. The strange part is that you weren't reckless. You didn't blow your savings on something dramatic. You didn't gamble it away or lose it in some catastrophic mistake. You just spent it, month after month, on things that felt minor, on convenience, on comfort, on the small upgrades that smooth out the friction of daily life, and each one in isolation seemed harmless. But they weren't isolated. They were compounding in reverse. Most people track money as if it's a simple in and out system. Income arrives, expenses leave, and whatever's left is either saved or spent. But that framing misses something critical, because money isn't just money. It's compressed time. Every dollar you earn represents a portion of your life you traded for it. Hours you won't get back. Energy you expended. Attention you gave. And when you spend that dollar, you're not just moving a number from one column to another. You're deciding what those hours were worth. The problem is that we make these decisions in the wrong direction. We earn money first, and then we decide what to do with it. Which means we're always spending in the present, using resources we extracted from the past without considering what they were supposed to build in the future. The transaction feels complete the moment the purchase is made. But it's not complete, because the money you just spent was supposed to do something else. It was supposed to grow. It was supposed to multiply. It was supposed to eventually represent time you didn't have to work. This is where the math gets uncomfortable. If you spend $1,000 today, you're not just losing $1,000. You're losing what that $1,000 would have become. At a conservative growth rate over 20 years, that's roughly $3,000. Over 30 years, it's closer to 6 or 7. So when you spend $1,000 on something forgettable, you're not trading it for the thing you bought. You're trading 6,000 future dollars for it, which means you're trading something else entirely. You're trading years. And here's the part most people don't calculate until it's too late. Those future dollars weren't just money. They were optionality. They were the ability to say no to work you didn't want to do. They were the margin that lets you take a risk or wait for a better opportunity or step away when something isn't right. They were freedom in the most literal sense, and you traded them for something you'll barely remember. People don't feel this in real time because the trade is invisible. You swipe a card, you get a thing, and your life continues. There's no moment where you feel the future shrinking. There's no pain signal. The cost is deferred so far out that it doesn't register as a cost at all. And by the time it does, the transaction is years behind you and impossible to reverse. You can't go back and unbuy the things that didn't matter. You can only stand in the present and realize they took up space that something else should have occupied. What makes this worse is that the spending itself often feels justified. You're not being frivolous. You're not buying things you don't need. You're solving problems. You're making life easier. You're rewarding yourself for working hard. And all of that is reasonable. Except that reasonableness, when applied consistently without friction, becomes a slow leak. Because every problem you solve with money is a problem you didn't solve with time or creativity or patience. And every time you choose the paid solution, you're reinforcing a pattern that makes the free solution feel harder. Over time, this creates a lifestyle that requires a certain income to sustain, and that income requires a certain amount of work, and that work requires a certain amount of time. And now, you're locked in. Not because you made one big mistake, but because you made 1,000 small choices that all pointed in the same direction. Away from margin, away from flexibility, toward a life that costs exactly what you make, no matter how much you make. The people who break out of this pattern don't do it by earning more. They do it by noticing the trade they're actually making. They start seeing purchases not as isolated events, but as future time they're giving up. And once you see it that way, the math changes. Because suddenly the question isn't, can I afford this? The question is this worth 3 months of my future freedom? And most of the time the answer is no. This doesn't mean you stop spending. It means you spend with your eyes open. You stop pretending that the cost is just the price tag. You start calculating what you're actually trading, and you realize that most of what you buy isn't worth the years it costs. Not because the thing is bad, but because the alternative, the version of your life where that money kept working for you, is so much better. There's a specific moment when this becomes real. It's when you run the numbers on your own life and realize that the difference between where you are and where you could have been isn't luck or talent or circumstances. It's a decade of small, forgettable purchases that bled away compounding. You didn't lose the money to anything dramatic. You lost it to nothing in particular. And that's somehow worse. Because if you'd lost it to something big, you'd at least have a story. You'd have a reason. You'd have something to point to and say, that's where it went. But when you lose it to 1,000 things you can't even remember, there's no story. There's just a vague sense that time passed and you're not sure what you got for it. The years went by. The money went through your hands. And what's left is the feeling that you traded something irreplaceable for something that evaporated. The hard part is that you can't fix this by earning more. Because the pattern isn't about the amount, it's about the ratio. If you make more, you'll spend more, and the gap will stay the same. The only way to change the outcome is to change the trade you're making. To start seeing each dollar not as something to deploy, but as something to protect. Because every dollar you keep is a dollar that gets to multiply. And every dollar that multiplies is time you get back later. People talk about financial independence as if it's a distant goal, something you work toward for decades and maybe achieve in your 60s, but it's not a destination. It's a ratio. It's the point where your money produces enough to cover your life without you having to trade more time for it, and the only thing that determines when you hit that point is how much of your money you let compound versus how much you let evaporate. The math is fixed. The timeline is up to you. And here's what no one tells you. The time you lose isn't just work years. It's good years. It's the years when you still have energy, when your kids are still young, when your parents are still healthy, when you still have the capacity to do the things you keep saying you'll do later. Those years don't wait, and every time you spend money that could have been compounding, you're pushing those years further out. You're telling your future self that the thing you bought today was more important than the time you'll want back tomorrow. Most people don't realize they're making this trade until it's too late to matter. They hit 50, and suddenly the math is clear. They can see exactly how much time they gave up. They can see the exact shape of the life they could have had if they just let the money work instead of spending it on things they've already forgotten. And by then, the only thing left to do is start over with whatever time remains. Which is fine. It's not a tragedy. But it's also not what it could have been. The uncomfortable truth is that you're not losing money to bad investments or market crashes or unexpected expenses. You're losing it to voluntary transactions that feel reasonable in the moment and meaningless in retrospect. And every one of those transactions is taking years off the back end of your life. Not money, years. And once you see that clearly, it's very hard to keep spending the same way. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next.